Good afternoon. We are continuing with our Unit 10. Today we are working on equations. Yesterday we were talking about expressions and how to combine those like terms. Today we're talking about multi-step equations. What's the difference between an expression and an equation? What is the big difference that you see, Chase?
An equation has an equal sign, an expression doesn't.
Yeah, the equation has an equal sign. So now we're going to be working on those like terms, but they're going to be with an equal sign in an equation. So PO61, I can solve multi-step equations. So solving a multi-step equation. An equation there we go. An equation with more than two steps. So multi-step equation has more than two steps. Multi-steps. So trust me, friends, it's super easy to make mistakes. Okay? You're going to understand the concept and go, oh yeah, that makes sense. I get it. But if you don't write everything out, every step, it is super easy to get confused with what you're doing and to make simple mistakes. And so when we're working with these multi-step equations, you really have to stop and think each step through. Write it down. There is no gold star for doing it in your head. Write it down. It's very important. There are three concepts we're going to focus on that make an equation multi-step. Combining like terms, we talked about that. The distributive property, we've talked about that. And in PO62, we're going to have variables on both sides of the equation. So we're going to learn what we do when it's on both sides. So that's coming up. Not focusing on that one today. So combining like terms, what is the goal? Who remembers if we're combining like terms, when we did that with the expressions, what was the goal?
Simplify the equation.
Simplify. So our goal for combining like terms is to simplify the equation by combining, forgot my M. So the goal of these multi-step equations is to simplify the equation by combining like terms. We will see stuff like this on the math test. You really need to focus and pay attention to how we do this. When combining like terms, you are only working with one side of the equation, just like our expression. One side of the equation. You do not double underline this because this is an easy mistake that people make all the time. You do not use opposite operations until you move terms to the other side of that equal sign to isolate your variable. That's when we do opposite operations, when we're going to the other side. Opposite operations, other side of the equal sign. Combining like terms is on the same side. So you don't do anything opposite. It's a common mistake. Mr. Schultz says he sees it all the time. So we really need to pay attention. I'm not sure what's going on over here, but it truly needs to stop. Okay? This kind of stuff is very distracting. Somebody else needs to pay attention. If you're choosing not to pay attention, that's your choice. And I have some eye contact, so I know you're hearing me. Please stop distracting everyone else. Anyone else. I need you to focus on you. So, let's see if we can work some of this out together. Okay, see if we can combine these like terms. It's like the expressions, but there is that equal sign there. So let me move this up. Of course, it doesn't want to scroll for me. All right. How do you think we're going to do 6x plus 4x equals 50? What should my first step be? What do you think, Katie?
Combining the 6x and 4x.
Yeah, 6x and 4x are like terms. They both have an x for a variable. So what is 6x plus 4x, Edward? 10x. Well, that was just one step. What else do you think I need to do to finish my equation? Sam?
You divide the 10.
I'm going to divide by the 10 because I'm going on the other side of the equal sign. So I'm doing the opposite operation. 10 times x, the opposite of it is divide. So I want to divide both sides by my 10. So 10 divided by 10 is 1x. 50 divided by 10 is 5. Okay, we've done stuff like this before. Let's look at our next one. Negative 8x plus 5x equals negative 12. What's my first step? Oh, wait. What should my first step be? Combine my like terms. So I have an x and an x. So negative 8x plus 5x gets me what? Negative 3x equals negative 12. What's my next step, Jocelyn?
You divide out the -3.
I'm going to divide by negative 3 because we have negative 3 times x. We want to do our opposite, so we're doing it on opposite sides of the equal sign. So when we're going to that other side of the equal sign, we do the opposite operation. Negative 3 divided by negative 3 is 1x. We don't have to write a 1 because we know it's just going to be the x. What's negative 12 divided by negative 3?
4.
It's a positive 4 because negative divided by negative is positive. So you're thinking to yourself, this is easy, Mrs. Gamby. You said this was going to be tricky. Well, now we're getting into that multi-step stuff. So let's look at our next example. 18n minus 10n plus 2 equals 90. What should my first step be? Paul?
So first we're going to combine the like terms.
We're going to combine our like terms. 18n minus 10n. What is that?
It's 8n.
8n. So I have 8n plus 2 equals 90. What's our next step going to be, Colin?
Since you do guys backwards, you have to get rid of the constant. So you do the opposite operation.
So we're going to get rid of our constant first because they're still like terms. So we want to move that like term over. So we have a positive, adding 2. Positive 2, add 2. What's the opposite of adding 2? Sam?
Subtracting 2.
Subtracting 2. Yep, so we're going to subtract 2 from both sides. Positive 2 minus 2, negative 2 is the same as a 0. So we don't have to write plus 0. So it's just 8n. 90 minus 2 is 88. What's our next step? Paisley?
You divide, now that you know what it is, now you would divide by 8.
So remember, our goal is to simplify down as much as we can so we get the variable by itself. So what do I have to do to get my variable by itself?
You divide 8 by 8.
Yeah, I'm going to divide by 8 because 8n is 8 times n. So I want to do the opposite because I'm going to the other side of the equal sign. 8 divided by 8 is just 1. So we have our n. 88 divided by 8 is 11. Whew. Let's look at our next one. 7 plus 10n plus 3 minus 2n equals 2. What should I do first, Katie?
Combine the 10n and
I'm going to combine my variables first. So I have positive 10n minus 2n is what? 8n. And then I have another set of like terms. I have my two constants. 7 plus 3 is what?
10.
Plus 10 equals 2. So I combine those like terms because it's on the same side of the equal sign. Then what, Amelia?
You subtract the 2 by 10.
I'm going to subtract both sides by 10 because I have plus 10. Now I want negative 10, minus 10. So that gives us our 8n equals plus 10 minus 10 gives me a 0. 2 minus 10. Negative 8. It's important we remember those positive and negative signs. So if it's 2 minus 10, we dip down into the negative numbers. So now I have 8n equals negative 8. Maddie, what do I do?
You divide by 8.
Yeah, I want to get that n by itself. So instead of multiplying by 8, I'm going to divide by 8. 8 divided by 8 gives me n. Negative 8 divided by 8 gives me a negative 1. Negative divided by a positive is a negative. Please notice the steps that I'm going through. Do I want to see you just put an answer? No. Notice how it's organized. I do one step and then underneath it, I write out the new simplified equation. Underneath it, I write out the new simplified equation. And we want to simplify it all the way down to the variable equals this. So as we're doing more and more steps, you should have more and more lines in your showing your work. No gold stars for trying to do it in your head. Show your work. There were quite a few of us who got a bit more wrong on that last test than what we thought we were going to get. And I noticed there were some of us not showing our work. You need to do the work, show it to make sure that you're getting it all straight, that you're not mixing up what you have to do. So that's the top part. Let's look at what it says on the bottom here about the distributive property. We worked with that distributive property. We talked about it the last 2 days. What is our goal of that distributive property? What did we do, Leah? How? Like, what were we getting rid of? Yeah, and what does that do? It gets rid of what? Remember what they're called? Oh. Ethan? The parentheses. So our goal of that distributive property is eliminating parentheses. So we want to eliminate the parentheses. That's our goal. Perm does. First thing you do is parentheses. You want to eliminate those parentheses first. So when we see 7 times, in parentheses, n minus 5 equals 42, what's my first step? Sam A.
It would be you multiply 7 by 1, or multiply it by both. So
Yeah.
7n.
So I'm going to multiply that 7 through to everything inside the parentheses. So we have 7 times n is 7n. And then what?
And then 7 times 5. Or negative 5.
7 times negative 5. Because it's minus 5. So negative 5. What is 7 times negative 5?
Negative 35.
Negative 35. So that negative shows up as a minus. And that equals 42. Now what do I do? What's my next step, Izzy?
You wanna... Oh, would you wanna add 35 to the other side?
I want to move that 35 to the other side so I get just the n's on one side. So if it's minus 35, we want to add 35 to both sides. So negative 35 plus 35 cancels out. So now I have 7n equals, what's 42 plus 35? 77. What's my next step?
Divide.
Rhino.
Divide it each by 7.
I'm going to divide out that 7 because we're multiplying by 7. Now we're going to divide by 7. So 7 divided by 7 is 1. I don't have to write a 1 in front of my variable. 77 divided by 7 is 11. I am down to just my variable, so I'm down as simple as I can get. I have simplified it as far as I can go. Yeah. So Leah's question was, could you have a decimal for an answer? Yep. If your variable equals the decimal, it could be. We're going to mostly be working with whole numbers. So on our assignment for today, they are all whole numbers. So if you get a decimal, go back and double check your work. What would be a way to check if your answer is correct? What could you do, Colin? Put the number that you get in for n. So if my equation is 7n minus 5 equals 42, I'm going to put an 11 in for my n. So if I put 11 in there, first I do inside the parentheses, 11 minus 5 is 6. 7 times 6, because outside of that parentheses means you're multiplying. 7 times 6 equals 42. So take your answer and put it back into the original problem for that variable. Every time you see that variable, that's the way to check to see if you got the right answer. So if you look at it and go, oh, I got a really long decimal, that doesn't seem right. Let me double check if that's what it's supposed to be. Put it back in every time you see the variable, do the math, and if it equals what it's supposed to equal, then it is a really long decimal. Chances are it's not supposed to be. But it's your way of double checking your work. All right, let's look at our next one. So Mr. Schultz's note here, distribute the coefficient to everything in parentheses, which we did, and multiply. Don't add them. When you're distributing over like that, it's multiplying. Okay. Then you do the adding or subtracting in your second step. Let's look at our next problem. Let's work it out together. 3 times negative 2x plus 9 equals 39. What is my first step? Edward.
Multiply the parentheses.
I'm going to multiply that 3 through my parentheses. So what's 3 times negative 2? negative 6. What's 3 times positive 9? Positive 27. So adding 27. And that's going to equal 39. What's my next step? Paisley.
You subtract 27.
Oops. Who can see where my mistake is? Ashley.
You didn't get that in after the negative 6.
I forgot the x. So I have that variable right here. I forgot my x.
Just kind of know.
Yes.
If you're doing that equation, does it have to be x? Or can it be
It has to be the variable of the equation that you're using. So you use whatever variable the equation gives you. If it gives me an x, I need to keep it an x. I don't want to switch it to an n because there's no n in that one. So keep the variable consistent throughout all of your steps. So now that we fixed my mistake, what do I do? Who was it that was telling me? Paisley?
Oh, yeah. You subtract 27.
Yeah, because our end goal is to get that x by itself. So I want to subtract 27 because I want to do the opposite because I'm going to the other side of the equal sign. 20 plus 27 minus 27 cancels out. So I'm left with my negative 6x. What is 39 minus 27? Joseph?
12.
12. What's my next step, Naveen?
divide negative 6 by negative 6 and same on the other side.
I'm going to divide both sides by negative 6 because that's opposite of multiplying. Negative 6 divided by negative 6 leaves me with a positive x. 12 divided by negative 6 leaves me with what? Negative 2. I am down to just my variable all by and lonesome. I can't get any simpler than that. I've simplified down as far as I can go. How do I check my work? I can take that negative 2, put it in for my x here, and it would be negative 2 times negative 2 is a positive 4. Positive 4 plus 9 is 13. 13 times 3 is 39. So you can go back in and check your work. Make sure that your variable answer is what it truly should be. Oh my goodness. Now we have 2 plus 8 times n minus 5 equals 122. Whew. Now we're getting into those multi-steps. Oh my goodness, so much going on. What should I do first? Instead of looking at it going, there's a whole lot of numbers there and I've got letters thrown in, what do I do? Take it one step at a time. What's my first step always going to be, Finn?
Well, technically you should. I feel like you should add the 2 and the 8 and then times it by 2.
That is a fair thing to think. A lot of people think you would do 2 plus 8.
Wait a minute.
Why should we not do that, Sam?
I mean, I don't know why.
But why? Why shouldn't I say 2 plus 8? Andrea. Does.
So it'd be.
I want to do parentheses first. Can I do n minus 5? Can I combine that? Why not?
One of them's a variable.
Because they're not like terms. So what's the second part of parentheses that I should do? No, second part of parentheses. I'm still at parentheses. Kaylin,
Multiply 8 by n and multiply it by negative.
I need to get rid of those parentheses.
Oh.
So my first step is always parentheses. If I can combine what's inside the parentheses, it gets rid of the parentheses.
Oh yeah.
If I can't combine the inside, then I'm going to do that multiplying through. Always take care of the parentheses as your first step. So I have 2 plus 8 times n. 8 times negative 5, so it's negative 40, equals 122. What's my next step? What should I do next, Briggs?
Oh, you should combine this off of the 2 and plus the 140.
Before I move my constants over to the other side of the equal sign, what should I do before I move them over? Ashley.
2 minus 40.
Yeah, I want to combine like terms. So once you take care of the parentheses, you want to combine those like terms. So 2 minus 40. What is 2 minus 40?
Negative 38.
Negative 38. So always combine your like terms before you start shifting things over to the other side of the equal sign. Does that make sense? So we did parentheses, then we combined like terms. Now we can do opposite operations. So what is the first opposite operation I should do, Ethan? Yeah, I have negative 38, so I want to add 38. Minus 38 plus 38 leaves me with 8n. 122 plus 38 gives me 160. Do I have my variable all by itself? Not yet. Multi-steps. Keep going down till you get the variable by itself. What should I do next, Finn?
You divide 8n by 8, 160 by 8.
I'm dividing out that 8, so I get n by itself. 160 divided by 8 gives me 20. My variable is by itself, so I've simplified it down. Caitlin.
Do you have to combine like terms before you do the opposite operation?
Yeah.
I'm going to say yes because it's the steps of the simplifying. Combine your like terms. I don't know if it's going to make a huge difference off the top of my head. I don't have lots of examples rolling around in my head, but I'm going to say you should combine like terms before you do opposite
Because I
operations.
didn't do it this one, and I still got the same.
Right. So you might end up with the same answer, but when it looks like a lot of numbers here
Yeah.
in a letter, we're going to get more and more and more complicated. This is pre-algebra. Just wait till you get to algebra. Okay, so if you are constantly moving stuff over, it's going to get more complicated. So are you going to get the same answer if you do every step correctly? Yeah, you'll still get the same answer, but is there a greater chance of making a mistake? Yes. There's a much bigger chance of making that mistake. So combine your like terms first. Get in a habit of doing that, so when you get to the way more complicated equations that will come, especially in high school when you're doing trigonometry stuff, you're doing calculus, get in the habit of combining those like terms first, so you don't make those simple mistakes. Cool.
At first, I did 8 plus 10.
Yes.
Yeah, now I know about that.
So it's really easy to make simple mistakes. It's really easy to say, 2 plus 8. Gotta remember PERMDAS. Take care of your parentheses first, inside the parentheses and distributing. So we don't want any parentheses left. That's the first thing we did was we got rid of the parentheses. Leah.
How do you know if the 2 numbers to use outside of the
Always the one that you're multiplying the parentheses by. So we know that we're multiplying because it's the number that's touching the parentheses. They don't have the multiplication symbol there because we just know anything that's touching up to that parentheses means you're multiplying it. Just like when we have 3n, we don't put the multiplication symbol there. We just know it means multiply. So that distributive property means we're multiplying it through. So you're going to use that number that's touching, that you're multiplying the parentheses by. So always use the number that's touching the parentheses. Let's look at our last example. I need some more space. I'm writing big. What's my first step? Edward.
Multiply the parentheses
By
by negative 3.
by -3. So what is -3 times 8n? -24n. What is -3 times -1? +3, because a negative times a negative is a positive. We can't forget that we have that 3n to start off our equation. You cannot move where that 3n is. It's at the beginning. It has to stay at the beginning. You can't say, well, I'm doing parentheses first, and then I'm going to put it at the end. You always keep everything in the same order. Again, you may end up getting the same answer, but when we get to more complicated problems, if you're switching around where your things are in your equation, it gets messy and you make mistakes. So keep everything in the same order. 3n minus, I think I used, here. So we've got 3n, because we started with our 3n, then -3n times, or -3 times 8n is -24n. -3 times -1 is +3 equals 3. What's my next step? Rhino.
You subtract 3 by 24 and
Why? Why do I subtract 3 by 24? It does make it easier, but what is it that we're doing when we do that? We're combining like terms. So you are right, that is our step, but we always want to know why. Why am I doing that? So we're going to combine our like terms. We have a 3n and we have a -24n. What is 3n minus 24n, Cole?
21n. No, -21n.
-21n. Oh, it's super important that we remember our positive and negative signs, which one it is. Lots of mistakes were made on the last test because we forgot those positive and negatives. What was it that we were supposed to do? +3 equals 3. What do I do next? Next step, Amelia.
Subtract 3 plus 6.
I'm going to subtract 3. +3 minus 3 leaves me at -21n. 3 minus 3 is... So what's my next step? Andrea.
You gotta divide 21 and divide it with -21. And you gotta divide 0 by -21. And 0 divided by -21 is 0.
0 divided by -21 is 0. Can we have 0 for an answer?
Yes.
How do I know if I did that correctly? Because, wow, I don't normally have 0 for an answer. What should I do, Katie? I'm going to plug it in and check, and I'm going to put a 0 in for this end, and I'm going to put a 0 in for that end. So 3 times 0 is 0 minus 8 times 0. We're going to do inside our parentheses first. 8 times 0 is 0 minus 1. So now I have -3 times -1. What is -3 times -1? +3. Does 3 equal 3? Oh, I can have a 0 for my variable. Interesting. So, our homework for today, still not working. Okay, the homework for today is you're going to solve for each variable. Show your work and that you checked your answer. So you're going to take that answer and equal 0, and you're going to plug that 0 into the original equation and make sure it works, that it makes sense. So when I say show your work, I want to see step by step, one right after the one underneath the next, just like I was setting it up. Step by step, show your work. You're going to work on this on your own. And when I see people whispering while I'm talking, it's going to be very frustrating for the teacher, especially when I've already talked to certain table groups numerous times and looked at them and given them little signals. Seriously, let's work on being respectful. Show your work just like I was setting it up. One step under the next step, under the next step. Trust me, you will appreciate following those steps when you get to the harder math. You might say, but I can do this in my head. This was easy for me. I want you to get in the habit of showing your steps as it's easy. So when we get to complicated, it's not a crazy mess trying to figure it out. So with that, we're going to say goodbye to our friends at home. We hope you are well and hope to see you